Hello and welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. My name is Paul Strangini. We are in the book of Micah, final chapter, chapter 7. And we'll begin with verse 1. We'll get right into it. Woe is me, for I am as when they have gathered the summer fruits, as the grape gleanings of the vintage. There is no cluster to eat. My soul desired the firstripe fruit. So, first verse is very metaphorical. Actually, a straight up simile. As, remember from school, you might remember that when something is a simile, it has like or as. A similitude. What does it mean? As when they have gathered the summer fruits. And it's very simple that, like, summer fruits means the first fruits, right? He says, my soul desired the first ripe fruit. I do gardening, and basically, when you plant stuff, it has a very productive phase where it produces its fruit, and then it kind of peters out. And things like with grapes and harvest, their clusters form, and then you gather the clusters. But whenever you do that, unless you're using modern industrial farming or slaves at the crack of a whip, there's always something missed, something left behind. There's always more fruit after that, but it's less. A lot of times it's dried out a bit. It's just always just the leftovers. He's saying it's all petered out. They're saying I'm like when they've already gone through and picked all the fruit and there's nothing left. The grape gleanings. The gleanings are just the last pieces. They pick off the big clusters and then you go through and there's a couple grapes here. There's a couple over there. Here's one. Here's two or three. The gleanings. Or in a field of grain, they go through and harvest the grain. And you could go through and you say, well, look, there's some grain here on the ground. There's a little bit left. And he's saying, I just got a little bit left. I feel like there's no satisfaction. I got this sense of it's all over. I desired the first ripe fruit. There's no cluster. And he's going to get to, and I'm just going to touch on that because he's going to interpret it. For the most part. I mean, the interpretation is going to be whatever follows. Or that's going to give us a clue. So a sip of water. The good man is perished out of the earth. There is none upright among men. They all lie in wait for blood. They hunt every man his brother with a net, that they may do evil with both hands, earnestly. The prince asketh, and the judge asketh for a reward. And the great man, he uttereth his mischievous desire. So they wrap it up. The best of them is as a brier. The most upright is sharper than a thorn hedge. The day of thy watchmen and thy visitation cometh. Now shall be their perplexity. We'll hold there, because it does transition. And he's thinking of men, the leaders, the great men of his people. And not just the great ones, though. Oh, I want a whole chapter or two back. Okay. It feels like there's no good. The prophets often had the sensation, like Elijah. They've killed thy prophets and dig down thy altars, and I am left alone. And I got the hair in my eye. And the Lord said to him, what did the Lord say to him? They said, I have reserved unto myself 7,000 men that have not bowed the knee to Baal. But still, among a great nation, 7,000 is really a very few. If you're at the grocery store, 7,000 people is a lot of people. But if you're in a nation of millions, 7,000 isn't a lot at all. So, if you're talking the world, where we have billions of people, over 7 billion people in the world today, what is a million? What does that represent? Well, you think about it, 10 million is 1%. So 1 million is like 0.1%. Shows you how big the scale of the world is. That's just, so a small remnant can actually be a lot of people, like in the sense of like, if you had a church with 1 million people, you'd feel like you had a pretty big church. You got 1/10 of 1% of the population of the earth. That's a lot of people. And 7,000 men that had not bowed the knee to Baal, it's small even by the standards of Israel at the time. But that's before Micah's time. But the prophets often had this feeling, and you may have this feeling like that. Like, I feel like we're alone and isolated, and there's nobody. And I've always, I've always believed like that. The Lord Jesus, He said, He talked about, if you should keep silence, then the rocks would cry out. And how the Lord is, God is able of stones to raise up disciples unto Himself, and that what that's saying is, because it's not like He's about to turn rocks into stones. Though He's God, He can turn rocks into whatever He wants. It's just a question of, because look at, we're made of the same stuff the rocks are made. It's like, well, that's silica. We're carbon based. You can just change the molecular, not just the structure, but the actual atoms. Just throw some electrons here, take the protons there, move things around a bit, and it's not a piece of silica anymore. It is a chunk of carbon. You can turn that into anything. It's all made of the same stuff. You just have to be able to manipulate it. Something we can't do. God is not of this world. He's the maker of the world, so that's nothing. God can raise up disciples from anywhere, and He does. I've never tried to fool myself into thinking that I'm some sort of indispensable servant. I know that I'm not, because God can have anyone do what He has me do. I'm just thankful that He's given me to do what I have to do. Like, I have a mission, I have a purpose, I have a duty, and He's given it to me to do, and that's great. Because it would be, because I want to do this. I want to do whatever it happens to be. I'm not saying this specifically. I want to do the things that I do. The things that I believe God wants me to do. But I also know that God could raise up someone else to do everything I do. The music, the Bible studies. Because it's His work, not mine. I am not an extraordinary human being. I did well in school. I score highly I did score highly on tests when I was young. But the point is, it's like, even, like I said, I was scored always in the upper 99th percentile in my tests and stuff, right? But even so, that puts me among millions of people. The upper 1% of, IQ and intellect are millions of people. It's not just, so it's like, so it's not smarts. It's not because I'm smart. It's not because I work hard. It's because God has given them the work to do. And so God raises people up. We are not alone. There are other people who are in the same place you are. They have the same zeal. They have the same excitement about the Lord. When Micah says the good man has perished, he's using, this is a hyperbole. And there you go. It's like some people would say, well, Paul, you're contradicting the word. No, I'm not. Micah never meant that. Like, there's just 0 good people. Elijah said the same thing, and the Lord said, no, you're wrong. I've reserved to myself 7,000. And when he says this, he's just saying most of the good men. They're just like the grape gleanings. Because you go harvest and you say, all the grapes are harvested. You know? They're all harvested. You go out there, you'll find grapes. It's just that there's no big clusters of grapes. That's the same thing here. You'll find good men. There's just no big clusters of good men. And that's very bad. You know, we don't want to have just like good men be rare. But don't ever think you're alone or that it's just all over. There, you know, it's like don't have that vanity of mind to think, oh, I'm the last one on earth, or one of a minority that's much smaller than it actually is. I don't need to see, all my brethren to know that the Lord is at work and they are there. You know, it's part of trusting God. Not to have that. It's learning the lessons of history. So I don't think he intends to mean like, oh, there's no good men in the earth, not one. And of course, in a certain sense, there is not one. There's none that doeth good, no, not one. It's like it says. Look in the lower verse here before I. Which verse was it? Oh wait, I think it's I think it's actually. Wait, is it? No, I don't. I thought it was in here. Oh well. Well, oh. That's too bad. I say when that's the kind of like I say, this is a bit of a sausage factory, meaning you're watching something being made without any facade of. Because sometimes I get stuck on a point. I'm like, I really wanted to say something about that. Verse 4. It is. The best of them is as a brier. I mean, like there's an idea there of there's a spectrum. There are the best of them, and they're terrible. But there's the best of them, and then there's the worst of them. And when it comes to good men, there's the best of the good men and the worst of the good men. But there's none good but God, meaning none in the absolute sense. Men can only be relatively good. Men can only be relatively righteous. And a lot of times that's what it's talking about in the New Testament and stuff. And in the Old Testament, it's like the good man has perished. He's not saying, he's implying that there have been good men. It's just that they're gone. The good clusters. I desired the good clusters. I wanted to see good men. But they're all gone. The Apostle Paul mentions good men. He says, lovers of good. Well, I think it says good. I think it's actually the men might be supplied. Lovers of good things. But lovers of the good. But there are men, when we talk about, Jesus was, because it relates back to what Jesus says. Someone called him good master. He says, why do you call me good? There's none good but God. Because he was taking the guy's words and saying, well, you mean that literally? Do you really think I'm a good master? And also I think there's some underlying suspicion that the man was just saying it. That's another thing. There's just to say it when you don't believe it. Good sir. When you don't really think anything good about him, it's like it's a flattery of the lips. There's something dishonest about it. There's ways in which you can talk about men who are not perfect as being good. And it's understood that you're saying, well, relatively, he's a good man. We don't have to be like reflexively always oh, there's none good. But when someone says something flippantly and without any real intent, like, they're saying like, good sir, or dearest sir, and you feel like, no, you don't mean that. Why do you call me sir since you have no respect for me? Why do you call me dear when I'm not dear to you at all? In fact, you're using that ironically in a sense because you feel just the opposite about me. You hate my guts. You hate my guts. And why you're saying that in a way, you ever been to a place where someone's like, sir, it's like, if you're going to talk to me that way, don't sugarcoat it with like, sir. Say, hey, buddy. Even that's ironic, but at least it's understood more. Well, and sir kind of is too. It's like if they say it that way. But I mean, there's something disrespectful in that manner of speech. Good sir, please. It's not meant. And I think Jesus disliked the dishonesty of speech. There's none upright among men. They all lie in wait for blood. Every single person is laying in wait for blood. Every single person is literally laying in wait for blood. That's not what it means. What it means is like the whole. He made reference to the cluster. It's not that there aren't outliers, and it's like today. You make a general comment about some group of people, and it's like I've seen this. You have to sort of say, well, not all. I know it's not all. Like, should I use an example? Like if you made a reference about the athleticism of a certain race of people, say, wow, those people, seems like so many of those people are athletic. Of course, not all of them are. I've seen some very unathletic people of that ethnicity, right? Or like, you say something about another ethnicity, like they're all so good at math, they're all so smart, they all do so good in school. Well, maybe the cluster of them do. In the bell curve, there's a standard deviation a little higher. There's always some truth in stereotypes. There's some truth, and it may be true of the cluster, but not of the gleanings. There's always outliers in every situation. So, but the thing is, it's a normal human activity to say, like everybody's forsaken me, everybody's out for blood. Everybody's hunting his brother with a net. Because in a sense, then you're looking at, the brother's hunting the brother with a net, and that brother is also hunting him with a net. They're hunting each other with nets. They're trying to ensnare each other. And that's fine. You can take it that way because I do like that because that is the image. It's like just of a world gone to hell in a handbasket, whatever that means. I never understood that analogy. Hell in a handbasket. The world is in a handbasket, and that handbasket is going straight to hell. Interesting idiom. So they all lie in wait for blood. They hunt every man his brother with a net. Does it mean, of course, there's the obvious. What he's using is the most extreme example. He uses extreme language to sort of make his point. He's saying there's no good people. They're all gone. There's no upright people among men. And all the men that are left, they all want to kill each other. They're all hunting each other with a net to capture. That implies some sort of like, putting them into involuntary servitude. They're all out for blood. They're all out to enslave. He's using the most extreme things that men do to each other because it's going on. And the thing is, like you look at the excesses of the 20th century, and what did cause it? What are the causes of those, the things that happened? Like with the Nazis and the Soviets. And ultimately, it comes down to the individual failings of everyone in that society to stand up for the truth, to where there's just so few people who stood up, who stood for what was right. I mean, just everyday people just allowing evil to proceed and being caught up in it and taken up in it and becoming part of it. Well, the government says we're doing this, we got to do this, and it's like my friends are doing this. All the peers bring each other along. All it takes is like the major cluster of people in a society to stop caring about righteousness and stop caring about enforcing uprightness and demanding it of their fellow citizens. That's all it takes. The people's willingness to just go along with lies, deceits, treachery, and murder. People, it starts off small. They get you doing little treacherous things, little deceitful things. And then it builds and builds and builds. When the whole society is given over to that kind of deceitful wickedness, the world becomes hell. And they're out for you. They're out for each other. It becomes that kind of... everyone hunts his brother with a net. That's so true in the Soviet Union. When they became... they abandoned God. They took up communism. And then it became like you're turning in your neighbor. And it was like a virtue to turn them in. So they could be sent off to the gulag. Inform on people. Snitch on them. People forget what that was like. And we can go that way too. And we say, oh, we would never do that. Oh, yes, you would. Once, because of the pressure. Most people don't have the moral fortitude to stand up when everyone else is sitting down, so to speak. And that's kind of literal too. Imagine in a room of just, there's a talk, it's hard to just get up and go. Especially if you perceive that there's a lot of pressure not to. It's one thing if it's like, it's okay to leave, you can leave. But when you know that there's a pressure on and that there's like there's a social cost to standing, to making a stand is what I mean. I sort of got into this analogy of like a room where you just got to stand up when everyone's sitting down. But my point is everyone else is assenting to the evil. And you are trying to stop it. It's one thing when there's no cost. Like there's no cost to actually acting. Like if you are in a lecture room and someone's talking and you just get up and walk out. But what if you getting up and walking out would sort of mark you as someone who would be marked for death? People say they would go to death for Christ. It's like they say, oh, I would defend your right to free speech to the death. But then, like, when they start curtailing the free speech of people, they don't show up. What do they do? What is there to do? Well, there's things that can be done. But nobody's doing them. They've got to be done. This phrase, they may do evil with both hands earnestly. They are earnest about evil. With both hands, you know what I mean? It's like they give both hands into it. I just love that thought of like with both hands. And when there's a lot of jobs that can be done with one hand. But sometimes you really roll up your sleeves and you put both hands in, and you got to it's basically saying putting all your effort into something. Both hands. Like we say sometimes we say jumping in with both feet. I got to jump into this with both feet. It means to get truly involved. There's an earnestness to their evil. They mean it. I think that's very true in our society today, that there's an earnestness to the evil that's going on. They don't just, they believe in it. They've been wrapped up in it. They've abandoned the way of truth, of uprightness. The prince asketh, the judge asketh for a reward. Bribery, bribery of public officials. And, it's funny because they found lots of ways to legalize this somehow. How is it that, I remember when, people, a lot of people, they go to Congress, they're not very wealthy. But like, when they're done, they're, fabulously wealthy. And I think they're very well paid in their job, at least by my standards. They're paid a very, upper middle class income. But they end up being super rich, many of them, not all. Some of them, because they're not all taking, grasping at every available opportunity to enrich themselves. They don't all do that. But so many of them do. And certainly in Micah's day, he was living in a world where like it was just everyday, common, the way business was done, taking bribes, asking for bribes. Now they have ways they can sort of get around it, or they try to get around it so it doesn't look like a bribe. But these, there's sleazy ways that people make a lot of money somehow off of just having been in government. How'd that happen? The great man, he utters his mischievous desire. And so they wrap it up. I guess I gotta look at wrap it up. I'm just curious. That's probably exactly what it means, but they wrap. Well, where am I here? There we go. Verse 3, they wrap it up. To wind, to weave. I like that better. They wrap it up, they weave. So they weave their wicked webs. So the plot thickens, so to speak. He utters his mischievous desire. Remember, mischief in the King James day was a much, today we say, you're such a mischievous child, and mischief is sort of like, oh, it's just good old-fashioned childish mischief. And so it comes off a little bit soft in modern English. Interesting. Mischievous is said in this, and I don't count it as flawless. I usually use the books, like I say, but Bible Hub says that mischievous is word 1942 from Strong's, which means desire, chasm, or destruction. I think chasm and desire, how does that mean? Well, it's like a gaping open, like an open mouth, like I desire, and it's a chasm, and it's also destruction, because that's where things go to be destroyed. So it has different meanings based on context. And desire is soul, the word that's usually translated soul, but that also has many meanings based on context. But his gaping, hungry, open-mouthed, destructive soul, like his selfish desires, is what that's sort of saying. His selfish and his need to enrich himself. And so they weave their wicked webs of deceit, murder, and whatever else, and rigging the system and the laws against the upright. Verse 4 says, the best of them is as a brier. We read that, right? The most upright is sharper than a thorn hedge. Like I said, the best of them. They have a best? Yeah, well, they do. There's degrees of evil. It's like there's degrees of good, but there's only one absolute good, and that's God. But of course, even God being the absolute good, it's funny because he will not seem good to all. I did a teaching on that, the parable of the worker's wages. And that's on my personal YouTube page. My personal YouTube page is, youtube.com/user/Paul Stringini. No spaces or anything. There you can see it. And while I'm at it, why not subscribe to Line by Line Bible Studies, this channel, and you'll be notified whenever I'm doing a study. If you click on the little bell, you'll get the notification, or you should. That's how it's supposed to work, but they say sometimes it doesn't. But in any case, please subscribe, and also you can check out my website, oraclesofgod.org. I have hundreds of hours of Bible studies on topics and books. I've done the whole New Testament, some Old Testament books. So, back to the word here. And if you have questions, I should mention that. Questions, send them to questions@oraclesofgod.org. If you have questions about this specific study, like if you think hey, what do you mean by that? You can put it in the chat, which I'm looking at right now, which is empty, and that's fine. If you're watching this after the fact, you can just put your question of course, to oraclesofgod.org. And if you get it to me soon enough, I'll say like, oh yeah, what I meant is this. If you send it to me late, well, I'll try to answer it. I try to answer all questions. I've gotten a lot of questions over the years. Now this, nobody's watching right now, so that's all right. Or just a few people. No, that's I say nobody's watching. Well, I know Katie's watching. I know other people are watching, and throughout the day, other people will watch. But there's, not enough people to generate a lot of questions, which is fine. Makes it easier, and I can go faster. But if I miss something serious, or overlook a point, or you think something I say is highly questionable, question me, and I'll do the best to answer. As a brier, these briars and thorns are very often in prophecy used to describe the nature of false prophets, false men, evil rulers, because they are an example in the natural world of a plant that is regarded as useless. All they're useful for, as it is said, is for the kindling of fire. As far as to men, I mean, I know they have a purpose in nature, but it's like you get thorns and briars, and you think of things like those. Well, you know them. I could pick up the kind of weeds. I always think of those particular weeds, the ones that grow tall with the purple flower, and it's got all these super thorns coming out. And when you're a kid, you walk on them at some point, and they can stick in your feet, and it's very painful if that happens. And that's what I think about my property. I don't have one of those on my property. We worked hard to eradicate them, and also briars on the other hand, or like stuff that, like the thistles that sort of get stuck and stick to you, and they're more annoying than they are useful. And the birds may like to eat them, but to man they are no use. They're an irritation. They're a pain. They cause pain. They're just in the way. They're something that needs to be removed. The day of thy watchmen and thy visitation cometh. I want to think that's sort of a reference to prophecy, or the prophets, like the day that the watchmen have warned of. And that could be, but he also might be saying like the day where your watchmen become significant, because watchmen are not really important until something happens. That's why you have watchmen out no matter what. That's why in the military they keep watch, because they sit there and they do nothing until something happens, and then they have to do everything. And they become the most important thing in the world. The day of, and that's their, and he's saying that's their day. When their day comes, when all of a sudden all they're watching becomes highly significant. When the enemy comes to visit, you will be in perplexity, is what he's saying. Verse 5. Trust ye not in a friend, put ye not confidence in a guide. Keep the doors of thy mouth from her that lieth in thy bosom. For the son dishonoureth the father, the daughter riseth up against her mother, the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own house. Therefore will I look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. Rejoice not against me, O my enemy. When I fall, I shall arise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light unto me. We'll hold there. So, a lot of times I remember I've heard people quote this verse and trust not your friends, trust not, don't put confidence in guides. A guide here is like a prince or a ruler, but, any kind of, actually I think it's captain. Yeah, it's captain. That's right. The word means like a captain. And a captain is a guide, like a captain of the ship, captain of a military unit, is a direct leader of that unit. So captains are important. Jesus is the captain of our salvation, and pastors are kind of the captains of their church. Keep the doors of your mouth. There's a very poetic way of saying it. Keep your mouth shut. Guard your lips. Loose lips sink ships. Is that so? Paul, what we should never trust our spouses or our friends or put confidence in anyone who's trying to lead us? He's not saying that. He's saying in this situation, that's the case. So that's the world he lived in. The son dishonoreth the father. The daughter rises up against her mother. The daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Our society's in that. I mean, we're headed down that path in that direction. I see kids dishonor their parents all the time. I mean, it's like, it's commonplace. And, it has to do with the way they're raising because it's not just the way they are raising them, It's also their own doings. The parent has to be respectable. I can't really do anything about that light. It's bugging me though. I'd say that. It's like shining in my eyes. So, parents, it's a very complicated thing raising children. And I have 8 children, and several have reached adulthood, and I'm pleased with the way they've reached adulthood. And I get along with all my teenagers. My teenagers do not disrespect their father. They don't. And that's important. If a man knows not how to rule his own house, well, whatever. I'm not looking to rule the house of God. I'm just saying it's something every man should do. Every man should take control of his house and rule it. What about women? Yeah, women should do their part too, but, what about men? Why is it always got to be about them? You know what I mean? And I know a lot of women study with me. I love you. But, if you have sons, you understand how important it is that men be trained in the right way, what they should do. Because a lot of times they don't know how they should be, how they should act in the world, how they should live their lives. Daughters rise up against their mothers. Yeah, that happens too. And it's because of, we have not, because I talk about the father, because when it comes to respect, the father is the most important figure in the house. If he isn't right, doing it right, the children will rise up against their mother, against him, against everything. A mother's role is usually different. Well, what about single moms? That's a whole mess. I wouldn't even know. I don't know how to advise someone. It's like saying, how do you run? How am I supposed to get a gold medal in the Olympics running on one leg? You can only hope to finish the race. You're not going to get the prize. You're not going to finish in first place. There's been a lot. It depends on the situation too. It's like, is dad dead? That helps actually. A dead father can be a great influence. Believe it or not. Better than a guy who's just off somewhere. Oh, well, he's some guy. He's not here anymore. Or I didn't respect him. I didn't like him. Just whatever. And I left him. All that stuff. There's all kinds of ways in which we can mess up the lives of our children, and mess up our role, I should say. Not that they're without blame, but we're the adults. We have every opportunity when they're young to raise them the right way. And when they become older and they disrespect us, yeah, that's on them also, because they don't have to do that. But the thing is, parents are the best guides to righteousness the children have. That we are the number one responsible parties. When they get to adulthood, they are responsible for themselves. But maybe we didn't guide them. But that doesn't mean now that they're adults, they can't find the right way to be. I think in many ways I wasn't raised right. But that doesn't mean I couldn't later learn how I should act out in the world, how I should be a father, how I should be a mother, or how I should be a mother. Or if I speak of myself generically, if I'd been a woman, I would figure out perhaps how to be a mother. And women who are not raised right can figure out how to raise people right. How it can be confusing though, if you haven't been raised right. But that doesn't mean the truth is unavailable. This harkens to Jesus' words in Matthew 24, Mark 13. I think he makes the same, has the same basic idea in Luke chapter 21. Basically, the brother betrays the brother to death, the father the son. Children rise up against their parents. It's like, when things are really bad in society, when wickedness goes to the full, family members start turning on each other. It's more normal, or the natural thing is to stick together as a family, to band together in your own common interest. I mean, no one should have more common interest together than a family. They have so much in common. They have so many reasons to want the others to succeed. But you saw like in the Soviet Union and stuff, they abandoned God. They took on a godless ideology. They allowed lies and deceit to permeate every strata of their society. And they were, and also in like the East Germany, all those states where they went on the complete godless path. The state encouraged people to snitch on each other, to turn each other in. And they were able to do that because in the society as a whole, at every level, the individual was not standing up for the truth. And it's hard when it becomes the Micah. It comes down to just a few people, just the great gleanings of grapes. It's really hard to do, and it's really uncomfortable to do, to stand up for the truth. It becomes very difficult, and you're risking your life. Micah feels that. The risk of life. Careful what you say to your wife. In those situations when you have godlessness running amok. I feel so great. I trust my wife with everything. She has all my secrets. That's scary. When someone has all your secrets, they know everything about you. They have the power to destroy you. And if you're living with someone who's wicked, it might not be such a good idea to give them all those secrets. Not be such a great idea to let them, and how many times you see people, they turn on each other when they have a falling out. They start talking about the other. Say things about them, about their private lives, what they're really like. They expose them to basically to make everyone around them like look at them and laugh at them or hate them, but or to get them actually in trouble, to get them in trouble with the law. Betrayal. I have a special place in my heart for hatred, for betrayal. I hate betrayal. I hate when you trust people and they're part of your circle of trusted people and they betray your trust. It's one of the reasons I hate divorce, because it's like it is a betrayal of trust, of a vow taken, and trust enshrined in and basically a vow to stick with somebody for better or for worse. It's like to create that bond. And then it's funny, at least in the traditional vows, it says right there, for better or for worse. Hey, the law says what it says. You want to break your oath, but the law, because the law allows it. But don't never think it's acceptable in the sight of God. It's just like there's no sins that are acceptable. I always think there's no sins that God's like, oh, okay, that's fine. No, that's why they're sins, because they're not acceptable. You can't. I'm not going to justify any sin. And that doesn't mean we can't be forgiven if we do them, but we don't. Don't. As a teacher, people say like, well, people ask me about divorce and stuff, and they want to know, whoa, it's this, and this, and you're in a terrible situation. Thankfully, in the New Testament, they give us the thing: if your spouse wants to leave, let them leave. If you don't want to be married to them and they don't want to be married to you, let them leave. But as Christians, we should not be the instigators of divorce. But family members can turn on each other, and they do. I mean, you see it. It's, and as the wickedness of the society as a whole progresses, the social pressure to not betray one another becomes dissipated, and so it becomes worse as the world around you gets worse. The world, the intimate world of family becomes also worse. And there's no, like I said, it's like to me, loyalty is very important, not blind loyalty, but we're all flawed, so there's some degree to which we need to have mutual loyalty one to another in a family to be able to prosper as a family. Yeah, and it's not, like I said, it's not blind. A father has to be honorable, at least not so that the best of them is, the best thing about my father is that he's like a brier and a thorn. My father's like, 2-day-old bread. It's not that great, but still nourishing. You gotta have some level of, still nourishing, still good. By and large, for the most part, on the right track. And build on that. We want to be built up in Christ from the foundation where we believe on Him. Right? That's a good thing about us. We believe in the Lord Jesus. We accept His teachings. We are ready to follow and serve. So you start. You can build on that. And everything on that is like you're becoming maybe not the worst. We want the worst of us to be better than the best of them. You know what I mean? You have to yourself be a believer in the things you do. You have to believe that you are someone who's ought to be honored and given loyalty to, at least in a abstract sense. Just for the sake of what fatherhood must mean to these people, your children, your wife. You have to kind of demand it of them, even if you don't fulfill the absolute best of that. I have a standard. No one disrespects my wife in this house. If I get wind of the children doing anything like that, that is a A1 priority to shut that down. You will not talk to your mother that way. I can hurt you. I don't mean physically even. I know what they like. I'll take away your mobile device if you happen to have access to one. Most of my kids don't. Don't give your kids mobile devices. Are you insane? Unless it's like, get them, but they need a phone. They need a phone. I'll give them one of these $13 little things. Oh, look at it. It's like product placement. Whatever. These are good. These are $13. It's like, it's just a phone. Minimal functionality. Keep calling a call from restricted? That's weird. It's funny. I opened it up and it was already on restricted. I went right to 3 seconds. But and I don't, my kids don't go to school. They have homeschool, so they don't need phones. I figure once they get a job and they can afford one, they can get their own phone. We get the house phone here, and I get a phone. But what I'm saying is, enough about the phone lecture. I can find ways to, they all. Do you like having electricity in your room? That can come to an end. There's all. You just gotta be creative. And be unrelenting, and without remorse, as far as in finding a suitable punishment. And one of the things I say is don't set a lot of ridiculous rules up. Like don't be that disrespecting mom. That's A1 priority. Running through the house. Stop running, please. And then, hopefully they don't. My kids are rowdy and rambunctious. A lot of people have seen their videos on YouTube, and they can see it's like these kids are rowdy, rambunctious. They have a lot of fun. Because I encourage that. I like that. I want kids to be kids. I just demand a few things of them. And that I demand Absolutely. There's no compromise. Never compromise on your principles. And make sure your principles are things you're not willing to compromise over. If you're willing to compromise over it, it's not a principle. I mean, if you're willing to be like, well, hey, sometimes it's okay to jump on the couch. Because you got to be consistent. You give them inconsistent rules. They're like, well, how am I supposed to tell when it's okay and when it's not? It's like, it just seems like maybe if I whine enough, well, then it's okay. Because I see all the time with parents in stores and like, Mom, blah, 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 blah. Can I get these and blah, blah. No. Mom, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it, lady. Don't. You can get one. You can get one. All of a sudden you were saying no, and she was just, you rewarded the whining? Are you insane? I don't think my children even know about whining. Because from a very young age, when they do make any sound I don't like, I have an instant negative reaction. And I don't walk it back. I don't overreact either. That's another thing. Don't overreact. You don't want to spank kids for everything. It's for important things. Like, I need you to tell me the truth. You must respect the other people in this house. No biting. No biting. Certain things are worth standing on. You got to believe in it though, and you got to keep it consistent. I think that's an appropriate use of that verse to some degree, because it's an important topic. Because you're living in a wicked world, it's very difficult. If you're sending your kids to school, they're being influenced by other kids. I mean, I remember by first grade, I had learned in the public school in a conservative, suburb of Chicago where I grew up, in good old Schaumburg, Illinois. There's a school with a lot of middle-class kids, Christian people, families. I learned sexually explicit rhymes and little songs and jokes. I remember first grade, I'm sitting next to this little girl, and she has all these jokes. And it's funny at the time. I was just like, "That's funny," or whatever. I was like, "This is weird." I never heard these rancid jokes about pencils and teachers and whatever. And I can't even remember them now exactly how they went or anything. I'm not going to tell them in my Bible study. But the point is, I'm in first grade and I'm being exposed to just filth. Because other people don't raise their kids right. Or they themselves are the servants of corruption. Their houses are full of corruption. My wife used to tell how she'd go over to a friend's house and there's just stacks of dirty magazines in the bathroom. You send your kids over to someone's house. How do you know there's not stacks of dirty magazines in their bathroom, just sitting there for dad to jerk off? That's his jerk off stack. Who does this? People do it. It's there. For me, it was, I didn't grow up in a house like that. But, it was very quickly, I found a lot of people around me did. There's all kinds of filth. They're not, and so, you send them, you don't know what you're sending them into. When you send them into school, you're sending them into an absolute toilet, cesspool of just everyone who happens to live in the area. Corruption is that, it's not like, oh, I live with all these well-to-do, moneyed people. I gotta get more like, because it's, every time I look down, it's like, it's just so, I just feel like I look like an alien. There's like, it's like it doesn't matter what the income they make, what their job is, nice family, they seem, people, there's like, what is a nice family versus what is not a nice family? Most parents think of like, well, they're a good family, they have money. I've always put my family first and therefore career second. And it's only now that, my kids are becoming adult that I really have to focus on business because I'm also home colleging them. And, or not, it's sort of like they're doing online things and learning through courses we take online for whatever skills they're interested in. Most of them are interested in computer graphics and animation and stuff like that, right? So I've put my family first, homeschooling, keeping them out of that cesspool. Because even in this country, I live in the country, right? Then I don't live in a small town. You look out my window, it's just corn. It's upside down, but it's just corn. There's just corn. There's no, my nearest neighbor is like, I don't know, a good mile down the road. There's one neighbor a mile down the road, and then the next neighbor in the other direction, you have to go like 2-3 miles. That's more like 3-4 miles. And then there's another neighbor out by the highway. And I'm gonna tell it's not right. Let's see everyone's desk over there. Let's see. Whatever. Who cares? I'm gonna fret the place in the camera. But I've got good neighbors, though. The people I know, my neighbors, some of them, and some of them I know they're pretty wealthy, but they don't like. What makes them a good family is not that they have wealth. What makes my family a good family and a place where people can come, like they send their kids, is that I don't have stacks of filth in my bathroom. And it's like, and anyone who knows me knows I have a history that I've had issues with things like immoral. When I was young, I was exposed to bad things, and I carried it with me into adulthood, and I had to overcome pornography and all that. And but at least I had the sense, and I think I attribute this to my father, that because I knew it was evil. I knew there was something bad about it, and so I always hid it. And and so it's funny. People say, "Well, it's natural and normal to be interested." Of course it is. I teach them that. But the point is, there is something shameful about just filth. Really, we should. If it's like so. Oh well, you shouldn't be hung up on it because it's. I know that's a liberal mindset of today. Like that. You should be proud of your sexual problems. They're not sexual problems. It's just who you are. And that may be somewhat true, or maybe who you are. But there's something disgusting about parading them out in public. It's funny how the homosexuals and the QPZXYs, their sexual interest is celebrated publicly. I just think it'd be weird, to take my interest and make a public issue of it, or to identify myself by that. Because even I'm a married man, I don't even think of myself primarily identified. That's not my identity. I'm just married. I talk about my life, but I don't talk about that part of my life. It's when someone exposes them, like if someone's an exhibitionist, they expose themselves publicly. Don't we all universally? That used to be universally understood to be unacceptable. And so at least have the decency to hide your sinfulness and your shame, like Adam and Eve did. But everyone's like, no, don't put the fig leaves on. Just be naked and open for the world. All right, I think I've come far afield. I'm talking about parenting. And it is a legitimate thing to talk about in that context. Running out of time. How many verses are left in this book? 20. I guess we're going too slow. We will finish it. We're going to finish it tomorrow no matter what. First thing in the morning, my mouth is lazy. So I have to actually enunciate very carefully. Especially because I had to work late last night. So it's funny, I the past couple of years, I get to bed pretty consistently between 10 and 11 o'clock. And of course, right as I start my line-by-line Bible studies, all of a sudden it's like that's getting extended to midnight or later, and it's really, it's funny. That's what it is. It's funny, actually. It's nothing other than that. I skipped verse 7 here. Okay. I will look at it's okay. I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. Obviously, we need to look to the Lord. We need to wait on God. And that is in raising, in a world of betrayal, where, like I said about the people at school, when you don't want your children, if your children are going to school with people who disrespect the parents, they're going to start picking that up. They're going to bring it home. I got to say that, a lot of the results I've achieved with my kids and my adults, I attribute to having access to them by I'm a work-at-home dad. My wife is a work-at-home mom. And I like that term better than stay-at-home, because it's like it implies you're not doing anything. She's a work-at-home mom. I'm a work-at-home dad. And we homeschool them together. And that, I attribute a lot of that. And also I have a big family. I wouldn't homeschool one kid. I think that's kind of cruel. Have an only child and then keep them at home. It's like they need more socialization. That kids need to roll around with other kids. They need to, you better get them into stuff, and the thing is, it's not, supervised stuff like my kids wrestle. That's great, but they need to have unsupervised activities where they can sort out problems and learn how to, deal with other people without having God standing over their head, essentially. And like, no, don't do it like that. Because it's like, that's what it becomes like. That's what helicopter parenting is. It's like if God was just sitting up on a cloud, literally you could look at him, and every time you did something wrong, he would be right there or every time you're about to hurt yourself, he would be right there to keep you from learning a good lesson. That's not how the world works. And your children are not going to be, you can't hover over them their entire lives. So I'm very aware of that as a homeschooling parent, so I do not do that. They need access to other kids. So, when you're trying to put your Christianity to your children, you gotta believe in it yourself, and that's the most powerful thing of all. I don't think it's about getting your kids to memorize verses. I've never done that. I never forced them to read the Bible. Well, they do. They done. My wife does, like they read Bible stories and stuff like that, and they've read, of course, but I don't know how I would say. I try not to. I don't like to do it in a way that's oppressive. You know what I mean? Like, I studied it because I loved it. That's how I want them to be. So one of the first things you can do to make that happen is to love it yourself. A lot of parents do not really love God, but they want the... I remember, I knew a guy, we had a neighbor growing up, and he was not a godly man. But he was dead set on his kids being so. So he applied like a set of rules to them that he did not himself follow, nor did he truly believe in. And that's important. It's not, we all want to impose a standard on our kids that we weren't able to follow ourselves, but that we're trying to follow. So with a sort of understanding of like they're just like us, they are of similar form, they're not going to be much more good at it than we are. Understanding that, you kind of are, you ask a lot and expect that you're not going to get everything you want. But on some level, you have to yourself believe in it. One of the things I said, it's important, like that I believe in the way I raise my kids. Not just that I raise them a certain way, but I also believe in it. So when I do an action, I don't, I stick to that principle. And this relates to this verse to me because God, feel is like that. It's like he is consistent. He has principles, and he requires belief. He believes in himself also. God has this unerring and unrelenting just faith in himself and his own, I'm God. And none else. He's not insecure about himself. It's not good for parents to be that way either. To be like worried about, well, what do they think? Yeah, I've made mistakes. Believe me, but I don't get all like, I apologize. Like, I'm sorry. Well, your dad makes mistakes. I'm not going to get all trying to apologize. And it's like, I'm the superior. Sometimes you get ground. It's like the world doesn't apologize. You know, you make a mistake, you do something, and the world chews you up a bit. It doesn't care. And I care a bit, but on the other hand, I'm not going to grovel before my children. God never grovels. Look to God. He is the one from whom we learn the ways of righteousness. He's saying all these things about men, and you can't trust men. So look to God. And that is the foundation of a good family life and a good world. When people look to God for guidance, some people these days try to suggest that's not true, but that is true. We need to order our lives. I mean, a lot of times people say they're looking to God, but really they're following their own lust. They're following their own desires. They're using God as a crutch and an excuse to do wicked things, to say wicked things, to pervert justice, to pervert equity. You know, they do all these things, but they do it in the name of God. And that should not be mistaken for actually following God. Because people rip on religion and say that all the evil that comes from it. But it's not evil comes from religion. It's that evil comes from men, and it's done in the name of religion. Just because someone says, I'm doing this for Jesus as he knifes someone in the chest, it's like, well, look at religion made him knife him in the chest. Religion didn't make him, well, because he thought the man was a sinner, or he thought the man was an unbeliever. That still doesn't come from it. It's just the excuse. It was done in the name of. People have been, it's in the Bible. They do things in the name of God that are terrible. It's in the Bible. This has been going on for centuries and centuries and centuries. And it's lamented in the religious text. So I don't know what you want us to do. All kinds of evil is done in the name of government. All kinds of evil is done in the name of, good intentions. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. People mean well. But to genuinely look to God is something different. It's to genuinely be looking to God for a light, for our guidance, to wait upon Him. He will hear me, meaning I'm going to call upon God. And I know this, God hears us. I believe that, because the thing is, though, a lot of times the response is not, I prayed to God for years before He answered me. I asked for the Holy Spirit over several times over the course of many years before the time when God actually responded. And in that response, the fact that He did eventually respond, and I knew that God had answered me, that made me so that I just believe it. God does answer. Up to that point, it's questionable to me, because God was like nothing. It was just the Bible and people talking and coincidences in my life, that I attributed to God. I had coincidences, like the way I met my wife. I thought that was, I'm like, it seems so perfect. Not just the way I met her, but who I met and all that. It seemed so perfect. I was like, God was in it. But then again, maybe it just happened. Someone's bound to get lucky. People win the lottery, right? I would rather win the lottery in finding the right person to marry than in getting a bunch of money. Because it's like, money will go, but it's like a bad decision in marriage can ruin your life. So we're 10 minutes after 8. Rejoice not against me, O my enemy. When I fall, I shall arise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light unto me. Our enemies will rejoice against us, but they shouldn't, because our fall is only temporary. When we fall, we arise. That's also, I see in that, an allusion to resurrection. Out of death comes life. Out of fall comes resurrection. Sit in darkness, and even the darkness of the grave cannot hold us. Of course, it's like, I like the analogy of resurrection, because the light and the darkness, what is a greater fall than even death itself? even if I die, even before the resurrection, like when I die, I've done things that mean that I will, like the things I've set up, I won't go away. I'm not going away. You can kill me, but my influence and the things I've done, they will go on and take on a life of their own. I have children, I have students, I have studies, I have works. They can't snuff it out. They can try. Fortunately, the enemies usually are not that interested in ensuring that, though. I can think of examples where they try to just wipe people out, destroy all their works. But actually, the more they desire to destroy someone, sometimes the more likely it is that someone is going to make sure that their work goes on. The more the enemies of God's people fight against us, the more futile their efforts will be. And it's important to remember that in your darkest place that the Lord can be a light to you. If you turn to Him, you have to turn to Him in the dark place. You can hear, there are always stories, if you look around, of people who've gone through terrible things. But what sustained them and what kept them sane and what gave them hope was the knowledge that God would hear them, that God would rescue them, or that ultimately that nothing could touch them because God was with them, that ultimately they can destroy your body. And God can bring it back together, remake it, give you a new body, and raise you up, make you again. They always talk about like taking human consciousness and putting it into a robot and all that stuff. And we have no idea how something like that would work. If it would work. It'd be arguable whether you wouldn't even know if that was the same person anymore. Like with this conscious stream of events that I'm experiencing, would that transfer over into that? Could we do that? By just replicating the state of mind and then passing it somewhere else? I don't know. But I do believe that, of course, it's possible, because I believe that's exactly what God does when He raises us from the dead. He takes us and puts us back together somehow. It doesn't have to be the same, it's not the same body. It's the same, the body is raised, but it's not, it's changed into something new. It's like a new thing. It's made out of something else. But it comes from the old. It's like a seed planted in the earth. The exact nature of that is, I have no idea. So, don't take that with a grain of salt as far as I believe in the bodily resurrection, but obviously the corpse rots away. And that, I remember someone said, well, what about when the body, it's in the ocean, it gets eaten up by sharks and little fishes and stuff? How are they going to get up? It's like, no, it's just, I always said, I think just from the general area where you died, it was just whatever molecules are there, or it's not about the exact molecules, because this body is changing anyways. My skin's flaking off. Which part of it, it's not so much that the physical molecules, but the structure that is me. The person that was comes back together and is changed. That's what the resurrection is about. Okay, so we have to finish. Yeah, that's fine. We've got enough progress. Hopefully we finish. If not, we can go to Monday. I'll probably have an incline. I went 15 minutes beyond today and many days this week. I don't know why. If I'm just pushing to get to the end of the book. I don't feel like I'm pushing, but I like to finish at a logical place. So, here, one more reminder, subscribe. Though honestly, after things I've been seeing going on YouTube, it makes me want to just pack up and go to some other service, because they recently banned a guy I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan of Alex Jones. He's, the famous conspiracy theory guy. Because he takes even true things and turns them into conspiracies. But whatever. I don't hate the guy. Of course not. But it's like, I don't listen to him, and I don't think he should be taken seriously. Well, whatever. I don't want to make a comment about that. My point is, like, they shut the guy down. And it was for dehumanizing sexual perverts of some sort or the other, right? I don't remember exactly what it was. Or did you, that right there? See what I just said? By calling transgender or something like that, by saying it's something else, I might have just dehumanized them. Now, to me, I don't dehumanize people. That's not how I think. But I guess, but I don't know exactly how he dehumanized them, but you could say something, you call someone a name like that, well, you dehumanize them. And then it was Muslims and also immigrants, whatever. I don't really talk about those subjects. But I do talk about immorality. Well, they banned the guy. They took down all his accounts from YouTube and Facebook, and I think that's a really bad indicator of what kind of platform this is. And I'm really looking for other options, because obviously, and I do keep copies of these podcasts, just not podcasts, of this live stream. I record it on my computer too, so I can easily take that somewhere else. And I may even for safety just back up, like, to some other place, because something needs to be done. They need to be made to hear the people. As people say, the companies are not, they're private companies. It's not the government. YouTube isn't the government. No, but we are. We're the people. We're the government. We can make them do what we want them to do. We can, if they don't want to respect freedom of speech, we can cause them to respect it, whether they like it or not. We have the power to impose that on them, and we should. Because the platform is much more than, it's almost like a monopoly. So something needs to be done. They can't be allowed to get away with that. Anyways, for now I'm on YouTube, and hopefully I don't end up with a bunch of videos that say YouTube and stuff and subscribe, and I end up on another place where it's like, well, I don't have that anymore. Yeah, that can be fixed. I can fix all that. A little editing. Anyways, this has been Line by Line Bible Studies. My name is Paul Stringini. Thank you for joining me in this study. I look forward to studying with you again very soon. In fact, tomorrow, beginning at verse 9. Okay, click.